Hey guys, Anna Crow here, another tutorial coming your way. Today we're going to paint some peonies, nice and red, ready for Valentine's Day. According to Feng Shui, it should help things in the bedroom, you know. But before we get to that, you're going to need a few supplies. So you're going to need some watercolor paper. I use 140 pound cold pressed. You're going to need some brushes. I use round 0 and 8. You're going to need a glass of water for rinsing your brushes, paper towel for dabbing your brushes, paints, and tape. Don't worry about stretching if you're new to this. And don't worry about the exact paints unless you want it to look exactly like this painting. Now you can see I have laid down a very thin coat of water. This is the wet on wet technique. We've talked about this in the previous tutorial, and we're just going to start dropping the color in. We're going to use this technique throughout the entire video. So I'm just going to show you this in real time, and then we'll speed things up a little bit. You go ahead and stop the video whenever you feel like you need a little break or you need to catch up. So what I've done is laid the water down. Again, I'm putting in a wash. So a wash is basically very thinned out paint. This is actually crimson red, but it's very watery, so it's got that really soft look. And what I'm doing is creating highlights for the future of this petal. And now I'm grabbing a deeper, thicker wash of color and laying that down. And now I'm going to let that dry and work on it later. You can see I'm working on a petal. I've skipped one. And the purpose of that is when you put the water down, you can have some bleeding if that paint isn't dry. So we don't work on petals next to each other. We kind of jump around as we're painting with watercolor so we can have a little bit more control. And you can see I've gone back into that petal and it was set, it was dry and set. And so I've now adding the shadows to it, and also I'm pulling a little bit of paint out because I want a bit more of a highlight there. Again, same thing to the leaf. Lay the water down, lay the very simple wash down, and then add your darks. To increase the value of the colors, I'm basically, with the red, I'm simply adding the burnt sienna or the brown, and I'm doing the same thing with the sap green. I'm adding that brown, that burnt sienna. Gets me that nice army color. I'm not sure if all of these dark colors are going to come across as color or they're going to look black in your video, but I'm trying really hard to improve my lighting so that you can see the color. You will see in the process of doing this painting, as it dries, the color tends to lighten up quite a bit. That's just how watercolor is, and I love it for that reason. So the more you paint with your watercolors, the more comfortable you're going to get, and you're going to start to realize how it's going to look when it dries, when it lightens up. Right now I've gone ahead and done this drawing of these two peonies, and in the background, so there wasn't a bunch of blank space, I created some abstract foliage and blooms and leaves just to give the idea that it is part of a garden of peonies, but really the focus is these two peonies because we're painting this for Valentine's Day. According to Feng Shui, at least Marie Diamond, who is an expert in Feng Shui, she says that it's great to have things in pairs in our bedroom, never singles. She also says that red is a great color for inspiring passion. So that's why we're doing this. We've got two peonies here, they're our main focus, and we're using this beautiful crimson red. So you might notice that I'm jumping around a little bit here, there, everywhere. It might seem like it doesn't make a lot of sense. A lot of watercolor artists tend to do that because we work on one area and then you let that area dry and work on another area while that's drying so that you can go back into it later. Just do it intuitively, whatever makes sense for you. Sometimes it makes absolutely no sense, only that I know exactly how I want to tackle that particular petal, so I'm going to go ahead and do it, and then I'm going to move on to another area and problem solve the painting. That's all it really is solving problems. Now that I'm seeing the foliage kind of come about, and I'm feeling like I need to bring some of these leaves to the foreground, bring them a little forward, and to do that we always add a little bit of richer color. So I've actually added a bit of hooker green to the sap green to get that more of a jungle color, and I really like how it's popping out and making some of the leaves stand out a little bit and the other ones are falling back. And I love this. I love working on the splashes. So I'll draw them out, because when I'm drawing, I get into that space of how I want the composition to look. And then when I'm painting, I just want to focus on actually creating the painting. So I will draw those splashes on my paper before I actually make them. But you don't have to do that. You can just go ahead and willy-nilly paint those splashes on however you want to. That's just how I do it. Everybody paints differently. But you can see how the composition's starting to balance out and come together. You can also see on these particular petals, there's going to be a lot of light. So when I start working on the other side, you're going to notice I've mixed in a lot of that burnt sienna and created that nice deep burgundy color, because the light's coming from the left, so kind of the upper left. So I'm keeping that in mind while I'm painting. You can see those nice deep dark colors that are going in. It's not black. It might look black to you. I'm not quite sure at this point, but it is a very deep burgundy. When it dries, you'll see kind of the center. You can see that did look black when it first went, but then it dried nice in that nice deep burgundy color. I'm going to go in and make it even deeper. At this point, I'm not paying too much attention to it, but later on I'm going to decide that it's not dark enough. And at the end of my paintings, I tend to do that quite a bit. I'll look at them and go, well, you know, this could be a little bit darker. And I'll go ahead and start adding a lot more darker hues and even blacks here and there. Adding some black to your painting, even if it is a watercolor, can make the other colors seem a lot brighter. There you go. Now you can see that middle burgundy, how beautiful that is. You can see that nice sheen of color with that wash on it. Not too much water. You don't have puddles. You don't want puddles on your paper. You just want a little bit of water, enough that you can move things around. If you put too much water on a watercolor paper, you're going to notice that it's going to start to buckle on you. So don't panic if that happens, because there is a trick to it. I don't stretch most of the time. I don't stretch at all. I do get a little warp with my paper. Sometimes I leave it. It's part of the character of the process. It's going to go into a frame and that will be pushed down anyways. But sometimes I will stretch if I'm thinking, okay, this is too big and I need to control this, because if you get warping, what can happen is your watercolor can start to move around and fall into the deeper parts of the paper that are sitting lower. But if you're not using too much water and you're using a heavy paper like 140 pound or 300 pounds, even better, then you don't have to worry about it. But I do always tape my paper down, and the reason why I do that is it gives me a nice border. We're not going to notice it so much with this painting because we're not coloring in all the white paper around it. We're keeping it nice and light and fresh, and you'll see that a lot with watercolor. Oh, look, Ella! She's been bugging me and sitting on me this whole time and loving me. So I just thought I'd introduce you to my kitty. Here's Ella. Say hi, Ella. She's like, the lights are too bright, Mom. That's my baby. I just love her so much. Anyway, where was I? I don't remember. Must not have been important, right? Oh, right. I was saying that I always tape my paper down because it gives you such a nice border. It almost looks like your painting's already matted. See how my lid looks like it's closed on my watercolor, and I have to keep closing it all the time because my cat, she has a water fountain, perfectly great place to drink water from, but she always chooses to drink my paint water, which I can't imagine is healthy for her, so I gotta protect her from that. And then she always is drinking out of our cups too. Does your cat do that? Alright, so I'm going to get these last bit of petals in, and then I'm going to go back and start adding the darks like I told you earlier that I intend to do. If you feel like this tutorial was too long, can you let me know in the comment section? If you feel like you'd like a tutorial in real time, also let me know in the tutorial section. I try to speed things up because the information's there, you're getting it, and you don't have to sit so long to watch it before you can jump in and actually create your own painting. At the end of the video, you can go ahead and stop it and copy the image. Just do a print screen, and then you can go ahead and paste that into Adobe or whatever program you maybe have. There's also free ones online, and print it off and trace it if you want to. Or you can just go and look for a real peony as your reference photo and use that to draw from. A lot of times I will change the way the petals are in the reference photo because maybe there's too many for such a small space, or there's not enough for a bigger painting. And also I'll change it a bit because I want to add those abstract pieces, those bits of water and those, suggestions, that foliage. You can see I had that nice deep color already on my brush, so I'm going back into all the other areas before I clean it off, and making those areas where there's those shadows just a little bit more pronounced. You can get opaque watercolors that go on very thick and solid, but I prefer the transparent watercolor because it gives you more options. You can build that up slowly, take your time, gives you some time to think. It's like when you do stippling, pointillism art, your dot, dot, dot. It slows you down so much that it gives you lots of time to think and problem solve. So that's why I like the transparent watercolor. Also, it just gives you a really beautiful effect in the end. And here we are, I'm going back in and adding those really dark darks and highlighting some of those shadows where I think it needs to be a bit darker. Okay, friends, that's how we paint a peony. If you like this video, please let me know and hit the like button. I would love to hear what you think in the comments below, or what you might like me to paint in the future. And if you would like to be notified of future videos and tutorials when they come out on my channel, please hit the subscribe button. We're almost at my favorite part, peeling the paint off. Come on, come on. Let's see what we got going on here. Okay, I need to settle down. Yes, yes, splash, splash, splash. Done. Thank you guys so much for watching this tutorial.